to be here to speak to this big crowd, and I'm happy about the interest in discussing the links with migration, agriculture, and rural development. My role as Senior Policy Advisor on Migration Development at Sida is a new position since September. So this is a new area for Sida as a policy area. Which means that my role is to contribute to develop internal knowledge and analysis and methodology on working with migration and development. And one way of doing that is precisely what you're aiming to do here, and that is to link, because since migration is a multi-dimensional complex phenomenon and issue, it really makes sense to link different sectors or different development issues and to understand what are the migration aspects of that, as you're doing here with discussing the links with agriculture and rural development. I have to start also by apologizing that I will be leaving quite directly after my speech, but I have some colleagues who are here present all of today and will be participating in the group discussions as well. So we will also have a follow-up and continuity in that sense. Because I'm also very interested to hear what your conclusions are on this topic. It's very interesting what has been formalized already with the FAO report and other agencies. A lot of development agencies are now and actors are now trying to understand their role in relation to migration and how migration affects their mandate and their work. Such as also was mentioned, WFP. And I think it was a very important background that was given in the introduction speech. I was present in Marrakesh in December, and it was very clear that the campaign in social media affected the whole process, and eventually the migration compact was adopted, and it has support of the majority of the international community. So it does have an importance in the sense that it also creates a new normative framework, and it has a new narrative around migration and development, and putting migrants and migration at the forefront as actors and agents for development. So that links back to also to see the potential for that. As Sigrun also alluded to, the trends in migration are in forced migration. The numbers are increasing at a record high level. UN figures on migration as such, when you look at it as someone moving and staying in another country for a year, that's estimated to 250 million people globally. But that can also be voluntary migration, and that could be like people like ourselves who move to do a job for more than a year somewhere else. But then, so in terms of achieving Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals, the role of Sida is to look at the most vulnerable, the poor people, and the people most left behind. And some of those are migrants or refugees or internally displaced. At the moment, there are 68 million people who are refugees, and 40 million, forced displaced are 68 million, and out of those 25 are refugees. and 40 million are internally displaced. So it's also worth to notice that many people are have fled by force inside their own and remain inside their own countries, and they're often very neglected. And it's also worth to note that 85% of the displaced people live in the developing world, in neighboring countries, and countries like Uganda or Kenya take large numbers of refugees and still have a lot of development constraints. The links between migration and development, they're very much, I mean, also as this discussion indicates, it's part of a wider learning process that we're all embarked in. There's a lot of research going on also to establish the links between migration and development. There's lots of questions being asked and lots of links that are not established with evidence yet, but are looked into. So that needs to be taken into account. But and there's also some challenges with just the lack of data for migration that has to be recognized. But just to the realization that migration is part of global history of development, and it's a two-way link. Migration affects development, and development affects migration. So that understanding is like the starting point also to address these issues. We have already in the Sustainable Development Goals some specific mentioning of migration and migration goals, and it's specified that that migration can be one means to reduce inequality in and among countries. So when we look at development challenges and opportunities, the role of Sida is to assess how migration can contribute positively to sustainable development. And at the moment we have a new strategy for global sustainable economic development that is being operationalized, that has specifically this target included as one of the of several aims, but to strengthen positive impact of migration on sustainable economic development. And it was also clear when we were that the Swedish perspective, both from Sida and from the government, is that migration is an issue that we need to address jointly and globally in collaboration. And that was also part of the statement made in Marrakesh, that no state alone can address migration, but we need collective action. And so that's also why this discussion is important, because we all have different roles and we can all integrate this perspective. Sigrun already talked about some of the drivers of migration, forced displacement, and also the use of hunger as a weapon of war. Migrants often live in vulnerable conditions and often lack human rights and inclusion, such as access to education, and often they risk exploitation and trafficking. And in addition, they are often exposed to additional vulnerabilities such as climate shocks and protracted crisis. And it was also mentioned by Sigrun that climate-related factors are something we need to understand more. There are a lot of alerts and scenarios that climate-induced migration may be a big challenge ahead of us. World Bank has reached the research that says that 143 million people could be forced to move by 2050. The trends are quite negative. If we see what has already happened, drought-related displacement has affected 1.3 million people in Burundi, Ethiopia, Madagascar, and Somalia. This is one example of an area that needs to be better analyzed and understood. And there are so far no reliable methods to predict or estimate how many people could lose their livelihoods due to climate-induced displacement. And other environmental factors are also important, like access to water, which also is a factor for escalating conflict and drive migration. So many of these factors are interlinked. And this one concrete example of this is the Sahel region, which has very severe drought that has led to millions of people leaving rural areas, moving into cities and moving into the regions and even across to Europe. Some of the opportunities, that's, I think, something that this discussion could focus on, and that's the potential of migration and the role of migrants themselves. The way Sida is approaching this is through our bilateral, regional and global strategies and to integrate migration in what we do. So to break down and to integrate, we have identified 5 focus areas that we will give particular focus. And one area is migration and education, and another one is safe and orderly migration, and that's directly related to the Migration Compact. One area is human rights and migration and prevention of exploitation and trafficking. Another area is, as was mentioned, the links with climate change and environment and migration, and also sustainable solutions for refugees and migrants, especially in protracted crisis. So some of the examples how we work. One example is work at the regional level in sub-Saharan Africa, where we're supporting African Union and other regional African organizations to work on a joint labor migration program to enable the states to fulfill their commitments to facilitate labor migration across the region, and that's a capacity building project. And linked to that is also building capacity in developing migration statistics for Africa, and together with Swedish Statistical Agency. Thank you. And another example of what we're doing is linking humanitarian relief and long-term support for refugees, such as in Uganda, where livelihood support to refugees and host communities is in focus through FAO, and also financial inclusion through UNHCR and through microcredit bank, Grayman Credit Agricole Foundation. So those are a couple of examples that relate a little bit to this specific thematic and discussion. But what I would like to send forward into your own discussions is to reflect on what can be done to include refugees in development processes, because that's one of the major challenges that they're often excluded from national plans, development efforts. And how can we include migrants as actors, development actors themselves? There are some initiatives to work with the diaspora group and to work with remittances, for instance, but also the aspect of strengthening the self-reliance of refugees is an example. So to conclude, I think this is also a good opportunity for working with building partnerships, which is really important to make these synergies happen. And that needs to be done at all levels, both local level and then up to global level. So thank you so much.